You're grinding every day. Long hours, no backup, no accountability. That ends now. The Empower Solopreneur Mastermind gives you one simple advantage: a weekly power session that turns isolation into domination. Every Friday morning on Zoom, you'll get real coaching and real feedback to make real moves. Join a group of driven professionals in a program designed for solopreneurs and people working at home. Stop getting stuck. Start scaling. Seats are limited. Lock in yours today at modernobserver.com/empower-mastermind.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. Hi, everyone. I'm Bill Correll, and I am here for our last recorded podcast of 2025 with my dear friend and compatriot in arms in making the world a more empowered place. And that would be none other than the Jan Jeremias. Jan, how are you on this wonderful Monday?
I'm okay, Bill, the Jan Jeremias.
Yes, there's only one, ladies and gentlemen.
There is only one.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. I don't know the world can handle more than one.
Well, you know what? That's probably true of most of us, I think, So I think in the meantime, there's a lot that's kind of coming to an end. And it just kind of strikes me. I love that clock.
I know. I was like, oh, here's the clock.
Yeah, this little clock, I think, was actually made in Stuttgart, which complete segue off of the topic, but my family comes from a little tiny Bavarian burg called Totenhausen. And I've yet to meet anyone from Germany that's ever heard of this place. But we can look it up on a map. It's really there. It's one of 22 little villages in, this area. There's one burgermeister who's got, authority over all of them, like a mayor. My dad went there about 20 years ago and visited, and they treated him like royalty. Showed him around to the house where Heinrich Correll came over in 1842, left the family residents over there that had been in their family for over 200 years. So complete segue, but that clock, it just rewards me so many different ways. So here we are talking about empowerment. Time is running out, ladies and gentlemen. Are we going to be okay? I love that. I love how we always, illustrate the outgoing year as an old, decrepit man with a long beard, probably not too dissimilar from mine. And the new year is always a baby in swaddling clothes, or at least a diaper, right? Interesting way to, to relate to a metaphor of what is going away and what's starting, where in truth, only human beings have this concept of something ending and something beginning. And if you stop and think about it, is it any different than it was 3 weeks ago or 6 months ago or this time last year? We're always in a place where we can stop, look, and listen. Remember how we were taught to cross the road? And why do we do that? Well, I think as a child, we were taught that it's a safe way to proceed. And I'm wondering right now at this late date in 2025, would that be a good kind of a metaphor for us as well, to stop, look, and listen? Honor what's occurred and really be appreciative and thankful and graciously acknowledge all of those things that worked and didn't work this year, but we're still here. And now we get to, some of us, if we choose to, view 2025 as coming to a close and having a last chapter that will be written 2 days at midnight. And then 2026, as we toast the incoming new year and we sing Old Lang Syne and all of those other old saws, and I can't think of Old Lang Syne without thinking about the Royal Canadian Orchestra. And Guy Lombardo. Do you remember Guy Lombardo, Jan?
I mean, obviously I know who he was, but it was, I just remember Dick Clark.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
You're a lot younger than I am.
that I remember, but Guy Lombardo, no. Not that, I
Yeah,
mean, obviously, through my parents or something, but not because I ever listened to him.
I know. I know. So yeah, Dick Clark, as far as I'm concerned, he was the actual Dorian Gray. He never aged over 40 years, from American Bandstand to all the years that he ushered in the new year and, kind of emceed all of the goings on boy, I'll tell you what. Have you ever been to a Times Square New Year
Mm,
celebration?
mm-mm.
Nor have I.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, I'm mildly interested. Yet there are some things in my life that I don't necessarily want to repeat. I'll probably never go to Key West for their big celebration. I'll probably never go to New Orleans for Mardi Gras. I'm at a point in my life where being in a crowd of drunken people, all having great revelry. I mean, they can do that every night of the week as it is now, but now they do it out in the streets, and it's more about conspicuous consumption and attracting attention to yourself, or as George Carlin used to say, playing "Dig Me," you know. So, with all of the different things that we could ponder and talk about, and what's on your mind today, Jan?
Well, a few things that you shared, and because you were saying, what's the difference between, like, let's say, now versus 4 days from now, and I think that there's always, for me, there's always this glimmer of, like, hope that kind of threads its way in, where, you sit there and you say, okay, well, this was not, depending on, this year was very challenging, or, had a lot that happened. And, you know, here's to hoping, or, and intending that this year will be better. So I think that that's why it kind of, people go in with, I don't know, I think with a little bit more maybe uplifting attitude, um, to some extent. I think the other, but so I think that's one thing. But I do like what you said about stop, look, and listen, because I really feel that that is so true. And that is really, I think, the key to, really the key to everything, is to not ignore with what's there, to be able to openly look at what's, going on for you in any given moment. But we'll just say, okay, now for the next few days, don't have to bite off more than like a whole year. Like, say, okay, today, can I pause for 5 minutes and just stop, look, and listen at what's present for me today,
Mm,
and to actually be with it. So to actually, I sent you that essay by Tara Brock, and then I was listening to, basically a Dharma talk she gave, and she was talking about the fact of like this feeling of connection and the fact that in general we long to belong, and most people feel like they don't belong, or don't have a place to belong. And, and the whole key is to really belong to yourself first. Because if you don't belong to yourself, then you don't belong anywhere. And every time, like if something comes up, to say to it, like, this belongs. Like if it's a
Right.
part of you and you're experiencing it, for the moment, this belongs, whether it's true or not true. Yeah, that doesn't matter. It's actually there. Then you can decipher whether, it's like I'm talking to myself and, I say a comment and where it's coming from and whether it's reflexive or reactive or, a belief or whatever. But that doesn't really matter. But for the moment, it's there. And at that moment, it belongs there. It doesn't mean that in 5 minutes it won't be gone, but in that moment, it does belong. And so
Sure.
stop, look, and listen really resonates with me at the moment. Um, yeah, because I think we then have to allow all the parts of ourselves to be there,
Yeah. I thought I
everything.
would resurrect for a moment a practice that we used to use early on, when we were doing this podcast 4 or 5 years ago, where we would take a word, uh, and we would contextualize it in our conversation, and then we'd go back and we'd take a look at the dictionary definition of that word, and then use that as kind of a springboard into nowhere. Uh, but the word hope, I think I think that's a really, really powerful word. It's a word that was used a lot by my mother. Um, she was the next to the youngest of 8 kids. She had 6 of her own, and so I think most of her life was not in the land of plenty. It was in the land of desire. And she used to talk about how our priest, when we celebrated the mass on Sunday, and he would give his sermon. And I remember being with her one time when she went up to Father Miller, and she said, why is it that you never talk about hope? And you know what Father Miller's response was? He said, if you leave hope in God's hands, all things will be taken care of in their time. Now, this is the same man that answered my question about, how old the earth is. And he said, the Bible tells us it's 5,000 years. And then I said, well, how do you explain dinosaurs? And his answer at catechism on Saturday morning was, it's a mystery, my son. So I kind of took it with a grain of salt, but I thought to myself, hey, what if there is somebody paying attention? What if we need to spend less time being worried? Because I think there's like a front of the hand, back of the hand relationship between hope and worry. At least for this conversation right now, let's say that that's so we can proceed. The the dictionary definition as a noun is a feeling of expectation and a desire for a certain thing to happen. Now, typically that's going to be an optimistic thing. It's going to be something that's desired or something that's wanted. It might even be, fulfilling something that's missing. On our archaic, but I'm not sure how long ago this was archaic. I think it was really just the feeling of trust. That hope was that domain that if you were sincere enough, the great pumpkin would rise out of the pumpkin patch, or the hero would come to save the day. If you would just have enough hope and enough trust in what's good.
The other word that comes to mind, Bill, is faith. And
Yes.
I think that that's when you're speaking, I'm thinking, I think of faith, um, where, I could say that there are certain people I know who don't, like, really don't worry,
Right.
and they have a lot of faith. They have a faith in a higher power, they have faith in something greater than themselves. And I think about that a lot because I think hope is slightly different to me. Hope feels for me almost feels like it's a lot more like they're both action based things because you actively have to have faith. Like, it's not a passive thing because at points you have to put in an effort to have faith, because if you're a human being and life doesn't go as you want, you do have to, like, actively, bring up that feeling of faith, because otherwise, you would give up. So you actually have to, or, so, and the same thing with hope. It's not passive. Like, there's intention around it. Whether that, and that intention is, might be to believe, but
I love.
there's
Would you
like
be interested in the biblical definition of hope?
a participation.
Yeah, I think this is Old Testament, by the way. I think we share this particular book. I don't recall exactly which one it is, but we're talking about Peter 1 through 3, which means it's New Testament, and also Hebrews, which also is New Testament. So you can't look this one up in your book, but I can look it up in mine. Uh, so the Bible defines hope as a confident, steadfast expectation and an insurance or an assurance of future good rooted in God's promises and character, but not mere wishful thinking. And I think that kind of points to exactly what you're saying, that there is not only an expectation, but there's a strong intentionality, and there's effort going into um, the expectation and intention that something good will happen. And it's not going to happen simply because it's Tuesday. It's going to happen because enough people all agree that it's the right thing to happen and it's the good thing to happen. And in the biblical sense, it's what God has promised and what God will deliver. So I think all of that higher power conversation for some people, um, I rarely hear the word hope used by folks in the media. It's clearly not usual for somebody to say that they hope something will happen, or that something will. They hope that what is hoped for Gaza, what is hoped for Ukraine, what is hoped for Somalia, what is hoped for all of these different places. No, they don't speak that way. They tell you how bad it's going to be. And sadly, there's this whole area and I think the Buddhists are really great at this. They believe that prayer, is the action part of intentionality and hope.
Hmm.
And I remember back, oh my God, there were when I was a kid, there were several catastrophes that took place on the planet all at the same time. And we're talking fires, floods, earthquakes, villages, and entire small towns in Italy being shaken and with thousands of people killed. And all of these monks were standing on a hillside in Tibet, all chanting, a mantra. And the intention of the mantra was that the world be healed. Not that bad things don't happen, but that the world be healed. And inside of that, different than making bad things go away, just that the world be healed. And just, if you fall, you scrape your knee, you get a scab, and sooner or later it heals. But the bad things can't just go away forever. You're going to have these things that happen in your life. Not recovering from them is a good example in my thinking of where it's not healed, where people change their way of being and how they conduct themselves and how they live from now on is kind of a monument to what happened and the fear that it's going to happen again. But there's also not room for hope inside of that, because we've decided to design our way of life and being around something so that it can never happen again.
But I think
Kind of sounds like our Congress.
one of the things that's missing there, though, and I love that what you're sharing. I mean, I actually, we always, a lot of times for many years, we would close yoga class with the words Loka samasta sukhinu bhavantu, which means may all beings be happy, be healthy, and be free.
Yeah.
And, and years ago, I remember thinking to myself, like, what is yoga? Like, what do I do when I practice? I pray. I pray, I process, and it's really like a prayer that you do with your body. It's not, that's the way I felt it. It was like a physically participatory prayer that was happening. But one of the things that I think part of the reason people change their behavior is because they don't know how to sit with the pain. They don't know how to sit with that pain. They try to think of something outside of themselves that's going to numb the pain or make the pain go away, and they don't know how to be okay with the fact that the pain is there. They don't know how to be with the hard emotions that come with whatever it is, jealousy, anger, fear, all those really deep-seated emotions. Like, people don't know how to be with that. And everybody's immediate reaction when something is scary or hard is to run. And I think we spend so much time running that we alter our lives so we never feel that again.
Yeah.
We spend the rest, I mean, me included, we spend the rest of our lives protecting ourselves at points, thinking to ourselves, like, I don't ever want to experience that again. And first of all, there's no way you can protect yourself from everything. And you learn that. And then the second thing is that sometimes you can still change, you can't change the behavior anyway, but you kind of know why it's there.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, I get it now. Like, this happened to me and I had this reaction. And maybe eventually you do. Like, if you actually sit with those things, maybe you realize that, okay, it happened, it's over, and you move on. But I think part of it is that people never truly are present for that stuff because it's messy. And
It,
also our society is not set up for that. It's not like you can, I mean, now they have mental health days, but it's not like you can be going through a really hard time and you can call in sick for work, and say, okay, well, I'm a mess today, or, somebody walked out, or I broke up with my partner, or, I mean, we're expected to function anyway. And I think that between that and the fact that we distract ourselves, we never really address what's going on. Just
I love what you're saying because there's an old way of dealing with weakness, and that is to grow strength. So in every area of our lives, we either look at weakness as something that's a character flaw that we have to live with for the rest of our lives, or you find an appropriate action to produce strength or muscle in the face of that. And I love what you're saying, having a cultural bias towards avoidance and denial of the hard things in life, or even labeling them as bad, is to roughly take 50%, and then sometimes in your life, maybe 80% of what's really going on, and numbing yourself to it by labeling it as bad and something to abhor or to avoid. Where the road to gaining some muscle in that area is, as you said, to sit with it and allow it to just be as it is, for a moment, until whatever response you're having, emotional or otherwise, subsides, which basically allows, if you don't do that and you don't gain some frequency and you don't gain some character as a result of having these experiences and being now experienced in going through that, which doesn't mean that you're prepared to handle anything that happens. It may mean that it takes more to upset you. And when you don't do that, you go through life being a victim of whatever may happen as opposed to what actually is happening. And That's where we're not living in the present. That's not where we're giving ourselves an opportunity to use all of our senses to really enjoy this moment of being, every moment that there is. Just being reminded that this is an extraordinary event for you and I to be sitting here having this conversation in our own particular surroundings with whatever's going on. And it's warming up outside, and it's going to be, after being 7 degrees the day before yesterday, it's going to be 48 today.
Hmm.
And there'll
I,
be people that will hear that, and they'll have to have a reason for that. And the point is missed. You're not experienced it while you're trying to understand it. If you'll just allow it to happen, there's no thinking that's necessary for that, allowance, for that, kind of embrace, that acceptance of, I don't understand what this is. I don't know that understanding it's going to change it. However, let me just see, what is it? If it were a color, what color would it be? If it were a taste, what would it taste like? If it were a smell, what would it smell like? What is this that's happening that I can gain some sort of experience with, that will carry me through, and I will not have to be looking around the corner for this. It may happen again, and odds are pretty good it may not.
yeah, and I think that even if you just sit with it, you're like, well, what is this feeling I'm having? You know, and I'm not, like I think that's the first, maybe or one, and then I don't know that there's any order really, but is what is this feeling I am having? So anger, okay, you know, i- you know, is it something deeper? Like, is there something else there besides anger? And just keep on asking yourself questions. It's like the questioning for me. And one of the things that really keeps on coming up for me is the fact that if we can't do this for ourselves, then we can't do it for anybody else. Like there's no room then for connection and communication with anybody else because we're so disconnected from us individually. Like if I'm disconnected from myself, very hard for me to find connection with other people. I may do it at a level, but if I can't show up authentically, meaning everything belongs, then no one ever truly gets to know me. And what they're getting to know isn't really me. It's some sort of fake version of me.
Now, some of our listeners may not see the value in having the world go that way. The I think another way to think about authenticity is being complete and whole, where what's available to you is everything that's available, not what you're guardedly allowing to be available. So, and inauthenticity doesn't mean that you're misstating the truth. And inauthenticity means, I think, that you're relating to the world in a way that is less than your full power. Inauthenticity is being in a situation and feeling strongly that there's action called for and doing nothing. Or being in a situation where the first thing you do is do something and don't allow the situation to be developed for you to see where there's an appropriate action to take in that moment, as opposed to having a habit where you always do the same thing. I think a powerful representation of that is two people that speak to each other and always, or 90% of the time, interrupt before the other person's completed their sentence. There's not any thinking that's going on there. It's just a habit.
Well, I've been spending a lot of time in, thinking about that because you know, there's so many phrases that we say to ourselves and things that like, that are automatic. It's just like it's like a record that keeps on playing.
Yep.
And you have a certain you have a certain soundtrack that keeps on going over and over and over again.
Right.
And sometimes when you start to look at what that voice in you is saying, like really listen, like you say something and you're somebody doesn't call you back and you're like, no one loves me. And all of a sudden, or whatever, or I have no friends, you know, nothing ever works out for me. All these phrases that we just automatically say that when you think about them, you're like, that's really not true. A lot works out for me, or I have a load of friends. But it's so automatic that
Yeah, and
it's
I think the measure of whether or not it fits the inauthenticity scale is if it's something that you say that's bad for you and you don't question it because it's just how it is. That's your first opportunity to kind of shake things off for a minute and just be present to what's really going on, as opposed to that repeated sentence that's been coming through your head for a long time. Nothing
Mhm.
new, and usually not your most enlightened thinking. You're going to
And you
have 80 some
probably
thousand thoughts a day.
right, and usually, I mean, I would, like, say that a lot of the time, it's phrases that people told to us that we've adopted,
Yep.
So, it's at some point in your life, someone told you you were stupid, and
And
then
of
all
course,
of
they
a
had authority, right?
and yeah, and they had authority, and, and then all or at least authority in your mind,
Yeah.
for whatever age that was, and all of a sudden, you make mistakes, and all of a sudden, you're like, "Oh, I'm so stupid."
Yep.
And that's when sometimes I feel like having a logical brain, like having a very logical way of thinking is beneficial because I've had phrases like that I say to myself, and then I'll be I think I mentioned like a few weeks ago, I I don't know, I was feeling I had had a really busy like really, really busy Saturday mornings are really busy for me. And Saturday afternoon, I did nothing.
Right.
And all of a sudden in my head, I'm sitting there going like, oh my gosh, I'm so lazy. And then I thought to myself, that's one thing that I'm not, like it made me laugh because it was like I'm so not lazy
Right.
that it was like, and I think sometimes when you start to examine them, like you even find how funny they are because they're so not true about, depending on your personality and your traits. So then it actually becomes humorous because you like sit there and you're going like, I can't believe I just said that to myself.
Yeah. And if you can laugh, then that's the whole point. Seeing the joke in things is really, it's really that's the transformational experience when you can take something that is heavy and usually takes you to your knees and laugh at it and say, there I go again. That's not important why, or it's not important what, but it's here. And that's what I do until I don't. That last part, until I don't, is really the most powerful part.
Yeah. I've been saying to myself with something that I'm working on when basically, it's let's say something happens and I have a phrase I say or a feeling that I get, and I'll be like, just another opportunity to practice,
Right.
just another opportunity.
See, that's the thing about life. That's all it is opportunity. There's no book that's written that says how things are going to go in advance. Um, the the saying in AA is shit happens. And what that means is everything that you want and don't want, all of it.
All of it.
What you can predict and can't predict. What's new for the first time and what's old and been done 1,000 times. All of that, it just happens. And there's a real interesting question that you can ask yourself, and that is, who am I going to be when it does? Am I going to be the person who's constantly being knocked over and incapacitated, or am I going to be somebody that can withstand the storm, withstand, the 30 days before the mast, as they say, lashing yourself through the hurricane to the mast and making it through, because the ship it's going to make it. But will you make it? You got to decide that in advance.
I don't know. I think that's very I don't know. I think that's a little bit, to me, harsh. I think I look at it a little bit more compassionate way, to realize that, yeah, you can say you're going to make it, but when basically, when the hits the fan, it's okay to feel and to be with it and to be a mess. I think that it's okay. I think we have to allow ourselves that humanness. And then we can sit there, then we can get up and move forward or whatever. But I think we have to realize it's going to be a mess. Like, there are things in life that are just messy. Someone passes away, it's messy. I mean, all of a sudden you have an illness, it's messy. And yes, you will, you have to make a commitment that you will overcome it, let's say. But I think there's a point in your life where you just sit there and in that initial shock, where you doubt and you wonder and you think to yourself, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to make it through this? And that's okay too, because you have to allow that to be there too. You just have to allow it all.
Well, Jan, you do know that many things can be true at the same time.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that, yeah.
And there's the way that a 5-year-old will experience what's going on in your life. And there's the way that somebody who's put the time and energy into planning for it, allowing the situations to always be what they were, not saying that they didn't devastate you or absolutely dominate all of your thinking or completely remove any doubt from your mind that you're completely powerless. All of that said, the 5-year-old mentality when you're actually 50 or 60 is not appropriate. It's completely inauthentic. It's called leaving a lot of skills that you can have or probably do have, and kind of defaulting to a response that's just a very, very young age. And for people who are easily challenged or easily upset by things that happen so-called to them, like they shouldn't be, is far different than somebody who's basically saying, like you did, sometimes life's going to be a mess. Sometimes you're going to be taken out of your game and there'll be no immediate response. However, how long are you in that disempowered and completely disoriented status before you start to recover your balance, before you start to get back on your feet again? The person who's done the work to realize that in the midst of all of the worst things of their lives, they've said, this too shall pass, whatever it is. Maybe those words gave them the strength and the willpower to kind of just hang in there and weather whatever it was authentically, trying to let it in, trying to see what it felt like, trying to see what there is to learn. And I think that's different than somebody who has a certain amount of tolerance that just gets beat down and beat down and beat down and beat down, and they get no chance to recover. And I can tell you that I've been in both positions where I've actually felt like my training was really appropriate and it allowed me to get up off the mat after taking a really brutal punch and get back up and get back in the game again, choosing that the game that I was playing was the one I wanted to play. And then I've also gone through a period of time, I mean, not to draw too fine a point, but losing 25 people in my life that really meant the world to me, one at a time, so quickly over a period of just a few years. There was nothing in my life that ever could have prepared me for that. There was no training I could have ever had. I had to go through that in order to be where I am right now and be okay with the next one that comes through and the next one that comes through.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is really interesting. And I think that um it's yeah, because I look at things that happened over the past, let's say, and I think some of it has to do with it in some ways for me has to do with attachment of
Right,
how attached we were to to our idea of the thing or what we thought should be versus, you know, or an idea about ourself that was kind of related to it, because then we
right.
feel like we lost our identity. We lost who we were for a moment or for a period of time. You know, because I think that what ends up happening is there's like, my divorce hit me really hard. It was a shock. It was devastating. I lost so many different identities, and and I was not prepared. And I probably navigated it the best way I could have navigated it. Like, I don't think I navigated it badly considering what happened. I think I navigated it quite well with the tools I had at the time. Not to say I'm accumulating more tools. Um, but I think that as human beings, we've got to remember that, the phrase I like is this too shall pass, never, like that kind of makes my personally, that's like such a phrase that does not resonate with me. The phrase that comes to my mind is just ride the wave. Just ride the wave, like waves, come in and out, just ride the wave. Or just like, you know, it's almost like somebody says she always thinks about it as like, another bus will come, like kind of thing, like, whatever phrase works for you. I don't really like this too shall pass. To me, I'm just like, okay, ride the wave of this one. And you have like, you have unbelievable waves, like high peaks, and then you have lows, and just keep riding the waves.
The beauty of language is one size does not fit all.
That's
Okay.
right. So that's
I
right.
love what you're saying. Find something that fits you and use that as your tool. Use that as your shield. Use that as your ability to, to clothe yourself against the cold. All of these things. It's like when you stop and think about all of the demanding jobs that there are in the world, like a surgeon. Some of the best surgeons have interned at emergency rooms for up to 5 years. The reason for that is so they can become expert at immediately becoming effective. In the early days, it's very difficult because they work 32-hour shifts at a time. That means getting a nap here and there, for the better part of 2.5 days. And then when you get into the advanced type of surgeries, my hats are off to people who have dedicated their lives to operating on infants and newborns. These are special human beings in my heart. But the ones that I've talked to have said it's different operating on a baby. First of all, everything is so much smaller. Second of all, is they don't respond to the same kind of stimulation that an adult would respond to. And the third thing is that you're never quite sure that the procedure that you performed in this particular instance was the one that will save their life. They're just susceptible to so many more things that would be life-threatening from being on the operating table. They don't have a lot of staying power, if you will, like somebody who is even 15 or 16 years old. So the point is that you get a submariner, somebody who's got nuclear missiles that they're responsible for. Why do they work 30 hours on a shift? Because what science has basically said is the better trained you are, the better decisions you make in the heat of the moment when everything goes, like you said, the stuff hits the fan. And the less trained you are, and the more you avoid the training and letting it in, the more susceptible and the more frequently you're knocked off your game and you have bad days. Does that make any sense at all?
I mean, to some extent, I mean, I do think that there are a few things then we have to, which surgeons learn is a lot of people in those kind of situations get burned out. They can't keep it going. Um, they don't have a way to decompress, to turn off. Um, they, I mentioned an article that I read many years ago. Um, about a surgeon. It was in Yoga Journal, and he was talking about the fact that he was like, obviously, he was a surgeon, and I think it was a hospital in New York City. And he was talking about the hours and and basically how much he had disconnected. That basically, he had totally disconnected. Like to him, he would look at someone who came in and he was just looking at that one area, which he needed to look at, but
Right.
the rest of the person did not exist. And how he remembers he started practicing yoga and meditation and everything, and all of a sudden it became hard to be a surgeon because all of a sudden he started to look at that person as a whole person, not just this heart or not just these whatever he was doing surgery on at the time. And I remember being so struck as he said he would cry in the beginning, he would cry in his mask because all of a sudden, sort of like the magnitude of what he was doing struck him. The
Right.
fact that this person's life was in his hands, basically. And that was, what a huge responsibility it was. And he wasn't sort of emotionally prepared for that. And so, to your point, I think that they are, but I don't know if they're provided with the right tools to help them, like you're saying, stay with it, you know, and, and to allow them to be, and the science is out there contrary that, that lack of sleep really affects people. And actually, how many, I mean, having worked in hospitals for 24 years, how many things are medical error because of exhaustion and things like that, you know?
Well, see, here's the thing. You get to do this. You get to move back from the situation and judge the system. Okay.
Right.
The person who's in the middle of the maelstrom does not have that luxury. The person who's
Yeah,
having
no,
it happen to them right now, no matter what it is, whether it's the surgeon or it's just somebody taking a phone call and finding out that their 16-year-old child was in a car accident,
no,
or
absolutely.
or it could be somebody who just found out that someone has to go in for a test that they may have a malignant tumor, but they have to go in for a biopsy. So there's all this time that they have to do. They're now as affected as the person who is at risk because now they know about it and they care about this person.
Mhm.
So the question, in those circumstances has less to do with how does, the system work in this instant, but how much of an impact and for how long is this going to have on my life, right? Isn't that really what we want to look at? Because we're very, very, uh, it's easy to say what's wrong with the situation, what's wrong
Yeah,
with
no, no,
me,
no, I
what's
was
wrong with
just
him.
commenting that I think that these people are amazing, but I think they are not privy to, um, having a hard time, like, necessarily having some of the things that everybody else has. There are amazing people out there in the world doing some
Yes.
amazing things. Amazing on so many levels. Each one of us hopefully doing our part and really trying to make a difference in some way. But I agree with you. I think that, once we're informed about something, depending on who we are, we take into that impacts us in some way. If you hear
Yep.
the news of a really sick friend, or if you hear the news of someone who's close to you who, like, had a sibling who passed, or or whatever. If you had To me, if you have a heart and you love that person, then you are affected just like they are affected, to some
Well,
extent, obviously. And then the question is, are you there for them? Like, even if it's just to hold space for them.
see, that's important because what we're talking about, there's a distinction here because systems are designed to create an outcome, and the system, I've believed for the longest time, systems do produce the actual outcomes that they are most suited and designed to produce. Now, that doesn't mean the system's good because there are systems that produce crap, but that's the way they're designed. This is not a situation um, where in a reasonable period of time, like look at how many women died in childbirth until some uh, midwives basically said what we do, and the reason why more women live after they have babies when we do it is because we wash our damn hands. This was like doctors. And then what's really disgusting to me, I heard, and I hope this isn't true, but I heard that up until like 1984, um, surgeons did not anesthetize babies because they didn't believe that the babies had the same sensory capabilities and were able to feel pain. Now, in my heart of hearts, I saw this factoid. I haven't had a chance to really run it into a rat hole, but I must do that in order for I'd rather hear that that's just totally wrong, or that there was a reason for doing that had more to do that they were more at risk from anesthetizing than they were from feeling the pain. But there are some things that we go through where the system isn't designed to produce a great result, and there's no incentive for the system to be upgraded. Now, all those things are outside of what you and I live through every moment of every day. Just withstanding the onslaught of thoughts that we have without anything ever really happening.
Hmm.
How do we navigate that? How do we give ourselves the peace of mind that whatever we're doing in the moment, we have an opportunity and we actually have access to making a difference with it? That what's going to happen anyway is all the things that always used to happen and they happened over and over again. Well, maybe this next time's different.
I think
How
the
do we
first thing that has to happen is we have to make a choice.
Yes.
You have to make a choice that, like you said, all those extraneous facts, all those things that are not going to influence the situation at the moment, we put to the side. We kind of were like, okay, not now, almost.
Right.
It's kind of like this little nagging child, which it really is, because if you think about yourself, you really, we have all these things in us from childhood. It's like a little child that you're sitting there, you're going like, okay, not now, you know, I will
Yeah.
get to you. I will give you your voice, kind of thing, if you need to be heard. But right now, I need to focus on, you know, getting in touch with what's happening in the moment for me.
I love how you're saying that. And there is a high correlation between a non critical thinking acceptance of this is just how things are, You know what I'm saying? This is the system. This is what life is. And having the awareness to drop back and ask the next question and say, is this as good as it gets? Is this as good as we can make it? Or is there something else that's possible just by looking into it? And having the power of that question in those dark moments, is this as good as it gets? Or is there something else that's called for here that we haven't really looked at before? What's missing as opposed to what's wrong? And that having that little bit of critical understanding that problems aren't how things are. Problems are how things are because you're untrained to do anything to make a difference with them. And if you have that way of looking at the world, now that you start to get like the top 5% of all the surgeons in the world, the top 5% of all the football players or basketball players, that are professionals, the top 5% of all of the people who have this expertise and experience and have been willing to push themselves past the learning um, foibles or the things that normally get in the way of progressing, in that particular area. This doesn't mean they're like that in all walks of their life. They're absolutely not. But I
Hmm.
think where we got onto this conversation, which I think is really, really powerful, is to stop, looking, and listen, as opposed to just defaulting to this is how it is, like giving up that this is as good as it gets. If you take a moment and you pause and you stop, look, and listen, maybe there's a glimmer. And glimmers are cool. Glimmers are cool. That's where you start getting a good feeling about what can come. And then you can describe what that glimmer was as hope. And I guess that's one of the ways that we word it, isn't it? A glimmer of hope. It's amazing what comes to us in a moment of clarity. When you've got hope, what's different?
I
This
mean,
isn't.
the next word that comes to my mind is possibility.
Yeah, that's great.
Is, is possibility. You know, I was reading an article about Hiroshima that I guess that they say that part of the reason that stuff would grow there again afterwards, because originally people were like, nothing will ever grow on this land again,
Right.
was the fact that people had the belief that it would.
Boy, does that speak volumes.
So, here was an area of the world which obviously was devastated. It was, I get the chills. It was horrible. But it was the attitude, it was that it got to be the fact that it was, I guess it was almost rumored, it was rumored that stuff would not grow there. And then that rumor was kind of put to rest. And it was the putting to the rest of the rumor that nothing would grow there again that actually allowed stuff to be able to propagate in an area which basically, you know, everybody had written off. So, it is. So I think when I think hope, I think possibility, which is why I think the new year always holds a lot of power for people, especially if they have a little bit of hope for, like, hope for a better year, because I think it allows people to think that maybe, things might be possible, whatever those things are for you.
Perfect. That is a perfect conclusion to this conversation.
Thank you.
And here we are on our annual pilgrimage to go everywhere we've gone and return back to the place where hope and possibility are present and maybe experience it for the first time, newly and freshly. Marvelous. So, any other thoughts?
No, I guess, yeah, not really. I don't think. I think that's enough for today almost. It feels like this was a very kind of it's a big conversation.
Yeah. However, obviously, with our training, we're up to it.
Mhm.
And we can take it on as fun and a lark as opposed to significant, meaningful, and the world is hanging in the balance. And hopefully one or two people out there heard something today that will allow them to have just a little bit more enjoyment. Maybe just as Pooh would say about his honey, maybe just a smackerel more of loving their life.
I love poop.
Yeah. He's a good dude.
He is.
Well, I'd say with all that said, would you like to give our final invitation of the year 2025 to our listeners?
Sure. There are those people out there whom you know. Maybe make a commitment to yourself that you'll reach out to someone in your life who you haven't spoken to in a long time and just let them know you're thinking about them and that you're wishing them well and a happy new year and that you're there for them. And just, start there.
I love it. With that said, I want to thank you, Jan Jeremias, for completing another year with this tired old gnome in our musings and our thinking about empowerment and how we can actually send that out to the world.
Thank you, Bill.
And I will listen to this finish playing its beautiful music. I think with all that said, I just want to say one more time in 2025, we are lighting the candle, a world that works. We thank you for being with us. Jan Jeremias, I really thank you for being with me. I love you madly. And again, ladies and gentlemen, please go out into the world, have a life that's worth telling stories about, and then come back and tell us all about it. Bye for now. We will see you in the coming new year where everything works, right? All right. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye, everybody.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a World That Works, part of the Xvadio Podcast Network. You can catch every episode of Lighting the Candle, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.